was fascinating, it was frustrating, and the end result is so good. And I think it's comically horrible. Hey girl, I failed. Nothing's working. Everything's going wrong.
I'm Nora, and this is also known as Nora Knits.
Hello there, I'm Nora, and you're watching, also known as Nora Knits. Thank you so much for coming to hang out with me for another podcast episode today. If you've never been here before, like I said, I'm Nora. I'm coming to you from a small farm in Connecticut, and I have just been sharing my knitting journey as I have now reached my first full year of knitting. And basically, my theme with approaching knitting is that the imperfections are what make something so perfectly handmade. So if you feel like that's something that you could apply to your own knitting and you'd like to join in on this philosophy with me, then I'd love for you to come hang out with us a little bit more often. But for today, I just have a regular podcast episode for you, and we have some things to get into because it was one of those weeks where just nothing was working out right. So without further ado, let's go ahead and dive on in. Now, no, you are not experiencing deja vu. I am indeed wearing a Corsavin cardigan, which is actually the pattern that I finished and featured as my finished object in last week's podcast episode. However, that was my second iteration of the same pattern. So this is the Corsavin cardigan by Tanya Hodney, and I just wanted to really quickly kind of pull out both of these sweaters so that you could see a little bit of the side-by-side differences, as I did make a few modifications in the gray version, the second version of this same pattern that I knit up. So quick overview, it is a bottom up cardigan, obviously features a V-neck. In the written pattern, these sleeves have this slight little ballooniness to them, and then there is this pretty skinny ribbed button band. And so I actually knit this first version of the cardigan pretty much according to pattern. I was using a Yarn Bee brand yarn that was the Must Be Merino, and I think the color was called mauve. It's a discontinued yarn, so you can't get it anymore, but it is a merino acrylic nylon blend, and so it is quite a bit heavier than the 100% wool version that I knit up next. I knit both of my Corsavin cardigans in the size extra large. Both of them, the main body of the basket weave stitch was knit using 5mm US 8 needles. And yeah, this one I didn't make any modifications, so I knit as far as, I might have changed the length or something, but as far as the button band and the sleeves, those were knit according to pattern. The only thing that I definitely remember I changed was that the cast on is supposed to be an Italian cast on, and I definitely knit this one using the long tail cast on because this was only the third garment I had ever knit, and I had absolutely no idea how to figure out that Italian cast on yet. So I think that the main difference in wearing these two, then the only other modification I know I made was that I actually included 5 buttons on the button band, whereas the pattern suggests 4 buttons. And that was really just based on how much coverage I wanted, how much this yarn was a little heavier, so I felt like it needed that additional button, and really just holding the buttons up to the cardigan, what I felt like looked the most proportionate. So I got these little shell buttons that I put on, and I really like the look of those. Interestingly, now that I have both of these finished objects with minor differences, if you really think about it, as far as the modifications that I made to the pattern, this version having the ribbed button band, the second version having a double knit button band, this version having the balloon sleeves, the second version having more of a tapered sleeve. And other than that, just the actual makeup of the yarns and the way that that affects the fabric. It's interesting that I will wear these two garments in completely different ways. So I haven't had too many opportunities to wear this one yet, but that's because I actually prefer to wear this version as a blouse. The way that I have it on right now, as you can see, where I just have a bare chest exposed, I'm wearing like a lacy bralette underneath. I like the way that this one kind of hangs on my body a little bit more. I like to just kind of slightly tuck it in. And I honestly feel like when I put something underneath it, it just looks a little bit off. But I think that's really because of the fabric that I got and the way that it is so much drapier and kind of slinkier. It has like more of a stretch and a bounce to it. And it's, like I said, heavier, so it kind of hangs. So in those ways, I feel like it works out better as a blouse for me. I also think this one in particular, the color of this, and I don't know how well it's reading on camera, but it really is quite a true mauve. It it has brown undertones to it, but it really does in person read quite pink, where I think on camera it's picking up a little bit more of the brown and maybe even more terracotta. I'm trying to think of what I could compare this color to. I can't think of anything that's really this color. But it's a very desaturated, pinky, natural. I actually almost feel like this is kind of the color of like a normal blush that I would wear or a lipstick I would choose to wear. I think it might even be like the exact color of my lips when I'm not wearing lipstick. I think that this color is found in my skin tone very easily, but it has enough contrast that I do find this color to be more flattering. And therefore, I feel like to have the bare chest and everything, it's doing me more favors. Whereas when I wear the second version in the oatmeal colorway, it can wash me out a little bit more. That being said, I've also worn that as a blouse and I don't mind the look of it, but I do feel like I have to maybe throw on a little bit more of a graphic eyeliner and like a little red lipstick or something just to make sure that there is some contrast and vibrancy in the look. But overall, I really just wanted to show off kind of these little differences. And so you could see a side by side of really the big differences that those factors do make. I have the other one here. If I've been looking down, that's why. But I do feel like so far I've worn this one already quite a bit more, even though it's only been done for a week or two. And I really just think that's because it's a neutral and that was what I wanted from it. But also the way that the fabric is lighter, I think it does better as a layering piece. And it does read more cardigan, more jacket-like, whereas this one does read a little bit more blouse-like. So I'm very happy to have both of them in my wardrobe. That was exactly why I wanted to knit this pattern again. And I feel like at this point, this basket weave is like serving me very well in my wardrobe. And so, yeah, I just wanted you to be able to see those differences because I haven't shown this cardigan on the channel other than in my Everything I Knit This Year video back in December of 2020. Okay, if something changed, I had to go empty the storage or the memory card. I forgot to clear it before I sat down. But yeah, I just wanted to wear this since I haven't worn it yet on the podcast. And I've mentioned it and I've referred to it so many times. But honestly, I've been waiting for February to wear it because it's pink and Valentine's Day in February. So that's my spiel on the Corsaven cardigan. I hope that at this point you have seen some side-by-side clips so that you can tell just the huge difference that it makes depending on all those little details in the fit, in the shape, in the yarn, in the fabric. All those little things really do make a huge difference in the finished object. So that's all I wanted to say about it. Now you've seen the differences between my two Corsaven cardigans and we can move on. So I don't even know where to start. Like I said, it's been one of those weeks where just nothing was working out. And more than that, it's felt like one of those weeks where you just take 2 steps forward and 3 steps back. And that has been the theme with everything. So let's go ahead and start with Dad's sweater.
They ask you how you are, you just have to say that you're fine when you're not really fine, but you just can't get into it because they would never understand.
So, for the past little over a month or so, I have been working on a sweater for my dad's birthday, and I was using the pattern Learn to Knit a Men's Sweater by Stacey Perry. And I honestly absolutely adore this sweater. I made a few modifications to it. We'll talk about that in a second. And I knit this out of Cascade 220 Superwash worsted in the colorway Jet. Now, I knit this for my dad starting in the size large. However, through trying it on, my dad and I are around the same size. I realized that the large was probably going to be a little bit snug for him. So I wound up increasing in the raglan so that I was knitting somewhere in between the size large and the extra large. And when I first cast this on, I had so many comments saying, be careful, superwash grows like mad. And I really haven't had much experience with superwash. And especially when I have, I think I've only steam blocked those garments. So I was really afraid of how much this would grow in blocking. And because of that, I was trying it on as I went, and I decided to stop knitting the body a little bit on the shorter side, assuming that in blocking it would just like, "Ugh." And a lot of people have said that that's been their experience with superwash yarn. But I don't know if maybe I was too careful. I mean, we were like so diligent about not letting anything hang. So it was really heavy while it was drying. And moral of the story is I gifted this sweater to my dad the other day when my family celebrated his birthday, and he loves it, but it's short. And I had a few people call me out in the comments saying that they thought that it looked too short, but I really thought it was going to block out more. And then I thought I was trying this on, but obviously I'm dealing with hips and a butt. And those aren't things my dad's dealing with. So I thought maybe that the length wasn't quite accurate. Whatever it is, it's not the end of the world. I knew it as soon as I tried it on for the last time to get the final clips that I did to show you the finished object before I gifted it to him. I knew in that moment, I was like, it's definitely going to be too short. And I told my boyfriend, I was like, it's either just right or it's going to be a little short. And it was a little short. So that wasn't the end of the world. But I was definitely, of course, a little bit bummed that that was the case. So that's the first thing, is that I have to lengthen or add length to this sweater. Now, there's two ways that I'm considering going about this. I think it's important to note that the body of this sweater is made up of these long spans of ribbing. And so it's not just a plain stockinette fabric across the body. And so I would love to try out the whole sweater surgery situation, but I'm a little bit nervous because it's unclear to me. And I've been trying to find resources and Instagram stories. People have been helping me there so much. Just trying to gather as much information as I can before I make a real decision or even try something. As far as how to insert a lifeline when it comes to a ribbed fabric. Now, I went in a few times and tried to just pop the lifeline in. And it's like when you get to that purl column, suddenly it's like crossing a little river. And I'm like, oh gosh, am I going into the right stitch in the next part of the actual knit portion of the ribbing? And I'm just so nervous that I'm going to get it all wrong and then totally mess this up. So the solution that most people have recommended, and actually is a tutorial by Very Pink Knits, who is Stacey Perry, the designer of this sweater. She has the great tutorials all over YouTube on how to knit. And she has a tutorial on adding a lifeline into ribbing. And what she says to do is go along your row or your round and pick up the right leg of those knit stitches the way that you would normally in stocking knit fabric, and then just skip over the purl stitches. Then turn your work over and skip over all of the purl bumps, which are the wrong side of your knit stitches. And then your purls in the fabric appear as a knit on the wrong side of the fabric. So to pick those up, the right leg across the round. Sounds easy enough, but I don't know why. I feel like because my spans of ribbing are so much wider, there's so many more stitches in between those purls, and I'm just so nervous that I'm gonna pick up the wrong row and then something's gonna go terribly wrong. Now, the other option that I see for myself here is that I can just undo the Italian tubular bind off that I had done, or even just snip that off and unravel. And I'm not opposed to doing that. In fact, I said that if I had to add length to the sweater, that was how I was going to do that. But then I thought it's a learning opportunity. You should learn something new, even if it scares you. And realistically, the worst case scenario here is that I have to rip back a little bit further than I had intended to and just re-pick up those stitches and pop them back on the needle. So I'm not currently seeing a scenario where this is going to end in disaster. And then that feels like famous last words. But I'm going to do a little bit more research and make sure I'm feeling confident. I'm going to try it on a swatch. I was even playing around with a swatch that I made yesterday, just trying to pick up all of the purl stitches. I just can't figure out what part of that purl is the one in the row and that you're supposed to pick up. Is it the rainbow? Is it the smile? Is it something that's not the rainbow or the smile? I'm not sure. I'm unclear. And for those reasons, I don't know what to do yet. That's where we're at with the length of the sweater. So, okay, we have to add length. Now, you guys actually haven't seen it. I'm sorry. I just realized that you haven't seen it since I put the zipper in. So, as you can see here, I mean, it looks terrific. It has its zipper. The zipper is perfect. I'll tell you more about how that went in a second, but I modified this pattern so that mine has a double folded collar, unlike the original pattern, which has the raw edge of your cast on edge as the top of the collar, and then you just keep knitting down. I decided to do double the length and fold it inside for the collar. To sew it down, I did a simple crochet slip stitch around. And then I used actually a needle and thread to just finish off the edge where the zipper is actually on that inside edge. So I sewed needle and thread through the 2 layers of knit fabric, sandwiching the zipper on the inside. Now, I don't even know where to start. Okay, so let's go ahead and just start with the zipper install. I'm going to go in chronological order of what I did. Okay, in the pattern, and I actually realized that the tutorial that comes along with this pattern is available on YouTube for anyone. So I will link that in the description so that you can see this zipper install because it was fascinating, it was frustrating, and the end result is so good. So what Stacey Perry recommends for your zipper install is actually to have a tool that's called a knit picker or I think it was called a knit picker. And essentially what this is the world's teeniest, tiniest little latch hook, which is like a little crochet hook with an arm that kind of comes up and down to close it. And I purchased this one on Amazon. I want to say it cost about $13. I couldn't find one in my local craft store, even though in the pattern or in the tutorial, she says you could just go pick this up anywhere. they were nowhere to be found around me. So I ordered this on Amazon, and she has the whole tutorial, and I took some clips while I was doing this because I think the color of my yarn did not make this any easier, but it was a very fussy process. What she actually has you do is lay out your sweater where you're going to be installing the zipper. Now, because I was putting the zipper into what was then going to be a folded down collar, I wanted to install zipper first, fold down collar second. So I measured where my zipper should start on the collar, and I had popped in a stitch marker so that I could see from that point. So then, with the wrong side of the fabric facing you, she actually tells you to take a piece of paper. This is the piece of paper that I used. And a pencil, and quite literally put the piece of paper up against your knit fabric. Again, the wrong side of the knit fabric. And mark every other purl bump. So you're essentially creating a template that is acting as your own personal ruler for the zipper install. Once you've done that, so you mark your whole way down from the start of the zipper to the end of the zipper, marking out every other purl bump. Then you transfer those markings onto the zipper tape itself. I used like a little white, it was a white oil pastel. She said a colored pencil. I couldn't get a colored pencil to work, but I had a little white oil pastel, like crayon laying around, and I used that to make my markings. So I did this all on one side of the zipper tape. At that point, you actually take your little tiny latch hook and a strand of the yarn that you used to knit the pattern. You would insert the latch hook through the zipper tape into those spots you marked, pull the yarn up through the zipper tape, and create a sort of slip stitch column going down the zipper. I found this to be fussy because the latch hook wouldn't stay shut, and then I couldn't pull it back through the fabric of the zipper tape, and then I was catching maybe 2 strands of the plied yarn. So this was not a relaxing process. This was not an enjoyable process. It was a little fussy. It was a little finicky. But once you had done that on one side down, I then went ahead and did the same exact process for the other side of the zipper. I did this all while the zipper was closed so that I knew it would line up when it was closed. Then my zipper tape at this point was very wobbly and wavy. The tension of the yarn, though I was trying to really maintain a balanced tension where I wasn't pulling it too snug, but I also didn't have it too loose. However, that was fixed super easily. I literally hit it with a steamer and the whole thing smoothed back out. So there you go. At that point, you would take a tapestry needle and the same yarn, and you would sew those slip stitches that you made on the zipper tape through the slip stitch down to purl bumps, through the slip stitch down to purl bumps. And she tells you how to do this in the tutorial. Admittedly, a little bit like she doesn't show that. She was like, you're going to do this and this and you're good. But you could figure it out. And my goodness, was that that was a good zipper install. I don't think that the zipper could have turned out any better than it did. And you can even see when it's closed. I have some close-ups here. The 2 edges of the I-cord edge that are there, I mean, it lines up so perfectly. It created this invisible zipper, which I love. I think that looks so professional, and it's not interfering with the movement of my zipper. it looks professional. The inside, I could have sewn some bias tape onto to hide you actually are looking at the back of those slip stitches that were created. I left it. I thought it looked tidy enough, and those are sort of the things that I like to include in a gifted item. To say, yeah, heck yeah, I did make that. Look, see? And yeah, I think it came out absolutely terrific. I, struggled and fussed a little bit trying to weave in the ends to make sure that they weren't seen on the front of the zipper. But overall, did I enjoy the process? No. Did I find it very fussy? Yes. Would I do it again for a zipper on the front of a garment? Yes. It looks so good. So no, this is not going to be the new thing that makes installing a zipper like easy and enjoyable to do, but it is going to be the thing that's going to make your zippers look perfect because it did. So that was a fun new thing to learn. Now, once I had done that, I got that zipper in and I realized the zipper tape and sewing it in really stabilized the fabric that I had left for the collar. So, whereas in knitting and then in blocking, I was able to stretch that part out a bit to really get that fold to come down quite nicely. I was no longer able to fold the fabric down the way that I was before the zipper went in. So, the night before I was gifting this to my dad, I said, I actually have to add length to the collar. So I busted open a new ball of yarn and I simply picked up stitches and, did my best to knit in pattern according to the 2x2 ribbing that's in the collar. The good news is the seam is on the inside of the collar, so I wasn't too precious about it. And basically, once I just kind of kept folding it down and folding it down to make sure it was going to line up with the neckline edge. And once I had knit long enough, I did a very loose bind off, just a standard bind off in pattern so that it maintained its stretchiness. And at that point, I used a slip stitch with a crochet hook to sew it down to the actual neckline. Now, this was the night before, so I was not going to be wet blocking this at all. So I simply went in with a steamer. I didn't do anything fancy. I just steamed it. I did mash it down a little bit so that the collar was a little bit less puffy and completely worked out. That looks fantastic. I also I felt like it needed a tag. I, grew up in a family where you sign your artwork. And so I wanted to do something like that. And now it's very late the night before I'm gifting this to him, but I'm like, this is the last thing I have to do, and then it'll be great. And I just very sloppily embroidered a little tag and sewed it in. I mean, it's horrible. I said, this is the kind of tag that only a father could love. And I was going to write to dad, love your daughter, handmade with love. No, I wrote 24. For 2024, and that's the year it was gifted to him, and he can remember that. But I should stay away from embroidery unless there's a tutorial involved because freehand is not my strength there. But again, I think it's comically horrible. And I sewed that in with a needle and thread as well. So that was all of that for the zipper install, everything like that, which was that I had left to do last week. So yes, between now and the next time I sit down to chat, I am hoping that this is ready to gift back to my father because yes, okay, I didn't even say he loved it. In fact, he opened the box and he gave me this look. He's opening it and he went, "Is this handmade?" It's like, "Yeah, Dad, I made it." He said, "No." And then all my family, they're like, "Oh my gosh." My sister's husband was like, if you told me you bought that at Men's Warehouse, I would believe you. I was like, thank you. So they loved it, and then I just felt horrible when he put it on, and it's about as short as the ribbing. Like, that's about as much length as it needs. So that's 2.5 inches in the ribbing. So I have to add about 2.5 inches in the body and then tack the ribbing back on the bottom. Also included in the pattern is an option for short rows to make the back slightly longer than the front. And that wasn't something that I planned to do. In fact, in the pattern, she says that was a specific requirement that the person she was knitting this for had asked for. But she said, I can't imagine most guys would need that or want that. And that's interesting because when my dad had this on, I really did feel like the back could use probably 3 to 3.5 inches, whereas the front really only needed, it was really just shy of his belt buckle. So I think if I knit another 1.5 inches, it would be a good length. But then that extra inch would give him the comfort of kind of being able to lift his arms and not worry about anything. But the back really could use a full 3.5 inches. So I will go ahead and do those short rows. And all is good because I have the yarn for it and Dad loves it. The first thing he said, he goes, "Oh, I can't wait to see what the girls at work say." He's like, wait till they see this. So he's excited about it. He really likes it. He's like, "What color is this?" "It's a charcoal gray, Dad." Um, and he had it on and he was looking all spiffy. He's like, "It's warm. It's so soft." So he loves it. So I felt horrible being like, all right, but I have to take it back now. But I want to get it done and get it back to him so he can start wearing it and hopefully get a few wears in before the weather warms up a little bit. But that's where we're at. So exciting and disappointing all at the same time. The good thing about doing this podcast is that it helps me to put a silver lining on disappointments like this where I could say, all right, do I want to go in and add length to this? No. Do I want to do sweater surgery? No. But someone else needs to see a beginner trying these things. Someone else, I'm sure, is sitting at home feeling the same way who doesn't want to do the sweater surgery and doesn't want to add the length or doesn't see enough people failing. And here I am to say, hey, hey, girl, I failed and I'm going to do the sweater surgery and we'll see what comes of it. So, that's one of the benefits that I get out of doing these videos. So I'm going to say thank you once again for being here and watching because it gives me a new sense of purpose and fulfillment, even when I hit these roadblocks in my knitting. So that's where we're at with Dad's sweater. I did actually complete this project on day 35. And so I guess maybe I'll even just start a new timeline of like the repair because it's going to take a few days before I can get through that. So I don't know. That's where we're at. Poor Dad's sweater, but it's okay. It's nothing we can't fix. The sleeve length was perfect and everything else really did look so good on him. So that's Dad's sweater. Learn to Knit a Men's Sweater by Stacey Perry. And hopefully next week I'll be able to say he loved it. So last but not least here, my current only true whip. The only thing that I'm really knitting on at the moment is my Seclen sweater by Cecilia Garcia Rodrigo. And I'm knitting this in the Karen Blossom Cakes in the colorway Cabana. And this is a V-neck, top-down raglan oversized sweater. It has a split hem, and the main feature is that it has these columns of ribbing that go all the way up the body, down the sleeve, and then flow perfectly into the ribbing at the hem. When we were chatting last week, sorry, I have like cables, I have needles, I have yarn, I don't even know what's happening here. But when we were chatting last week, I mentioned that I had sort of haphazardly started the ribbing on the back part of the split hem. And I rushed through it because I was in the middle of doing something else and just wanted to get the process going so that I could keep knitting on it. But I missed part of the instruction and it had to do with the selvage and slipping the stitches. So I thought, all right, I'll just pull back and that's okay. So I did pull back, and then I went and I revisited the instructions, and I realized that I had read it entirely wrong. So I sat down and I went to do it again, and I realized, this doesn't add up here. Basically, it was telling me to knit the pearls and purl the knits. So now I'm like zooming into the photos trying to see what I was like, why would it want me to do that? The whole point is that the ribbing flows from the body into the hem. Like, that was a great detail. Loved that about it. That's kind of why I'm knitting this sweater. And I'm looking at it, scratching my head. And the front and the back hems are identical as far as I could tell in the pattern, but had different instructions in the pattern. So that didn't seem right to me. So I thought, all right, let me just try knitting the instructions for the front hem, and maybe that's going to be more accurate. So I did that. That wasn't right. And then I went ahead and I just went with my gut and what I would have done, which was essentially, again, just knitting the knits and purling the pearls once you split for the hem so that the ribbing does continue from the body into the hem, and then just continuing with the 2x2 pattern across the row. And sure enough, that worked out. So slipping the first stitch, knitting according to the ribbing that you start with, and then continuing 2x2, knitting the last stitch because that's what it said to do in the pattern. And that seems to be fine. So this is the pattern that is originally written in Spanish and then translated into English. So I have the English copy of the pattern. It's been translated. I'm not translating it myself. However, my project is the first one that's come up on Ravelry. And so I'm kind of feeling like this wasn't test knit. And I'm kind of feeling like the English translation was done by someone and then wasn't like looked over. And so I kind of feel like it honestly feels a bit like I've been testing this pattern. And I don't mind that, but I certainly picked this pattern with the intention of like a mindless knitting project that I was going to follow the pattern verbatim and just, knit my way through it. I wasn't expecting to have to do as much thinking as I've done. And I don't love the fact that if you bought this pattern, you'd be doing all the thinking that I'm doing. So I'm in connection with the designer where, I'm letting her know my feelings. It works out that I am able to read the Spanish pattern. And actually there's a few, so this wasn't the first little error that I found in the pattern. So I've been making a list of them as I've gone. And as I go through, I will then double check the Spanish pattern to see if it's an issue in translation. Is it just a number that's off? Is it wrong in both versions? And the instruction for the back hem was right in the Spanish version and then wrong in the English version. So the good news is I just followed the instructions that it said in the Spanish pattern, and that was what I had done intuitively anyway, so not a big deal, but I am at the point now with the back hem where I'm pretty sure she says to knit for 10 centimeters, and that's about where I'm at here. So I haven't bound off yet. I just have my needles floating on there, and I wanted to just wait and see until I knit the front hem if I would like for the back hem to be a little bit longer than the front hem. So that's, I feel like, something I've seen before, and I have some sweatshirts and other sweaters that do that. So I just haven't bound this off yet so that I could decide once I've done the front hem how I feel about that. But the back hem is essentially done, and it went smoothly once I got the once I got it figured out, and it looks really good. So That's good. From there, I needed a break because I wasn't ready to tackle the front hem if that wasn't going to be the right instruction. So the other night, actually, once I got home from my parents' house, I needed mindless knitting to recover from my dad's sweater not fitting him. So I decided to pick up for the sleeve. Now it's a raglan sweater, so the stitches were on hold and I just had to pick up under the arm. And I remembered that I had left my shorty needles on the cable, assuming I was going to start knitting the sleeve soon. And so I didn't really check anything, and I just went for my bag and I saw 5 and I was like, "Yeah, that's the one." Wow. Apparently, I actually had my US 5 needles on the cord still, and that was actually from working on my dad's sweater. When in reality, this sleeve is to be knit on US 8 5mm needle. So I knit the first few decreases, first like 15 rounds using a 3.75mm needle when it was supposed to have been a 5mm needle. Because I was using a US 8 I was using a US 5 versus a 5mm needle. And I noticed as I was going, I was like, my hands are really hurting. But I thought maybe I just had to adjust again to knitting in the smaller circumference. And boy, was I wrong. So here I was again having to rip something out. At this point, I was like, nothing's working. Everything's going wrong. But since then, boy, is it more comfortable to knit on these needles with this yarn. The sleeve's working up just fine. And we're chugging along on this thing. I wish it was more mindless than it is, but at this point, I think I have everything figured out other than that front hem, which hopefully the instructions for that are right. And if they're not, I'm just going to do the same thing I did on the back. And yes, like I said, I'm chatting with the designer. It's getting worked out. So if you want to knit this, I'm sure that it will be fine by the time you do. I've just been Miss Pioneer over here finding these little issues as I go. And that is what it is. But, I wish it wasn't. That's it. So that's where we're at on this. I did want to share because I don't know that I've seen people do this before, but I felt pretty clever about it. When I am knitting my sleeves, what I like to do is I'll check the pattern and let's say it says you're going to do a total of 10 decrease rounds. I will grab 10 stitch markers and link them together like little linking monkeys, and I will just pop that onto any random point of the sweater. So then as I'm going and every however many rounds you do your decreases, I'll grab one of those stitch markers and pop it on the decrease. That way I know by the time all of my stitch marker linka monkeys are gone, then I'm done with the decreases according to the pattern. I can try it on, see where we're at. Then once I get to the second sleeve to make sure that they match, I will knit to the recommended, whatever it is, however many rows, get to the decrease round, and I will then mark those decreases by stealing back the stitch markers from the first sleeve. And so each time I knit a decrease, I will take one of those off. And once I get to the end of the second sleeve, all of my stitch markers have been transferred from one sleeve to another. And now I know I have knit the exact amount of decreases as I did on the first side. And that way, if I did something wrong on the first side, I'm just mirroring it on the second. And so in the end, it should turn out looking symmetrical. So that was just a tip that I had. As you can see here, this is my second sleeve where I have now knit 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 decreases. And on my first sleeve, you can see that all of these stitch markers from the underarm to about halfway down are missing. And then I have the remaining 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 decreases to go. So that's what I'll do. And I'll just keep knitting. At that point, I'll try it on and make sure that both of the sleeves are the right length. Then I will go ahead and knit both of the cuffs. And yeah, everything should start coming together all around the same time. I thought I'd have this done by this week, but clearly the zipper and all of that just took so much longer, and whatever. I don't care. It doesn't matter. So that's my Seclen sweater by Cecilia Garcia Rodrigo, and that has now been on the needles for 19 days. I did think at this point I was going to have started or at least swatched for my next project that I'm planning to cast on, but I don't even want to do that until I get the things addressed with my dad's sweater. So I thought it would be kind of fun if you could guess. I've kind of given some hints. It's going to be another gift knit. It's going to be cables. And yeah, I actually mentioned it back in my winter knitting plans video. So it probably will be the last of my winter knitting plans that I can manage to get done during the winter. So if you have any guesses what you think that next whip will be, the next thing that I cast on will be, then definitely let me know in the comments because I know a few of you definitely remember. Other than that, my plans are, like I said, to just wrap up Dad's sweater yet again, get those changes made. I will, at that point, probably just wet block the bottom part of this sweater where I will be making the adjustment to the length and everything. And I will try to keep you in the loop as far as how I go about doing that. If you do like to stay more in the loop, I'm very active on my Instagram stories, and that's where I go when I need immediate help. So if you want to stay more in tune with things like that, I definitely just recommend that you go hang out with me over on Instagram at akanoraknits. And yeah, other than that, I am hoping in the coming week to update my finished object photos because we just have not had the time to do that lately. So hopefully we can get some new finished object photos for the past few finished objects that I've had. And then we can get those up onto Ravelry. Another reason to go hang out on Instagram because I'll definitely be posting them there as well. Another long one. Aren't you lucky? Anyway, you guys, if you enjoyed this video and knitting content in general, I would love it if you would come hang out with us more often. I post these podcast videos every Saturday morning at 9:30 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, and we won't even talk about the setback that was last week. So thanks for your patience in that whole situation. Just talk about another one of those things that this week was not my week. But generally speaking, I do post every Saturday morning at 9:30 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. And so if you want to keep up with me over here, then I definitely recommend you go ahead and subscribe. You can ring the bell. And if you liked this video, I would so appreciate it if you would go ahead and give it a thumbs up. All of those things that YouTube really does like. And other than that, you guys, big ol' thanks for watching. I will catch you in the next one. All right. Bye.